What I'm going to talk today is essentially the challenges that the changes in the O&M environment will bring, both on the large scale, on the commercial scale, and on the residential scale for companies that they provide services, O&M services. So I'm going to touch the whole market. So before I do that, let me very quickly, allow me very quickly to go through a small presentation of who we are and what we do. So Greensolver creates environmental and financial value by enabling higher global deployment of assets. We are a global company. We are working in 9 different countries at the moment, offering commercial and technical asset management services, construction management services, and advisory services. We have 1.76 gigawatts under management on wind and solar, about 1.8 gigawatts that we've constructed as owners engineers, and we have 14.5 gigawatts of advisory services under our belt. We are one of the few companies that they have 4 different quality certifications, including an ISO 55001, and we invest heavily on innovation, on tools, digital tools, or tools as the Greensolver Index, which is a benchmarking tool, and Green Boost and Blade Solver, which is primarily focused on the wind side. So this is pretty much our split. We have actually ventured into 2 new markets. One is the Greek market, and the other one is the Portuguese market. We have, as I said, a global reach. And these are some of our clients. We work primarily with asset owners, with big infrastructure funds, pension funds, and also banks. However, my role here today is a bit different. I've been a vice chair in the O&M working group on the Solar Trade Association for 2 years, and currently also I am the vice chair in the Solar Power Europe in the O&M and asset management task force. So we see companies and we speak with companies across the spectrum from small to large across Europe. So we see some specific trends developing, which I think are extremely interesting, and it could give us an insight of how the future will develop. So I will be talking primarily about the challenges and the opportunities, and I will try to give you my perspective from a smaller installer, smaller service provider firms. So how do I read the O&M market in the UK? I've split the market in 4 different categories. One is the large-scale asset market, which you have big O&M companies like BayVa, like BSR, like PSH, that they have, portfolios that they are close to 1 gigawatt, maybe more than that. And they have the resources, they have people on the ground, they have field-based teams, they have large overheads, and also they are constantly investing in tools, because tools allows them to find economies of scale. And these are mainly digital tools, so improving reaction time, improving data capture within what they do. The situation with these installers, or this category of service providers, if you would like, is that there is a tremendous price pressure. So last December, we were discussing with Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and we were looking at average prices across Europe, starting at 5,500 euros, going all the way to 10,000 euros per megawatt. But I would say that in the UK, we are in the lower scale, so we're looking at all-inclusive prices, that including all the ancillary services, like cleaning and grass cutting or land maintenance, which they are at about 5,500 to 6,000. So even at this price, we see more and more service providers that they are trying to win a market share by driving the price down. And this is a self-cannibalization, if you would like, of the market. So there are specific challenges there, a complex management structure, and this presents also an opportunity for smaller firms, and I will explain why. The second category is, again, large-scale asset managers, or large-scale assets. where you have you have an umbrella, if you would like. You have a main contractor, but this contractor is actually using local subcontractors to deliver the services. The problem with this is that when you use local subcontractors, you have limited resources. You have essentially teams that they do everything. You might have, an MD that is actually an MD in the office and is also providing engineering services in the field. You're not able to compete on larger tenders. You don't have the balance sheet. You don't have the bankability as a company to compete on larger tenders. And that creates a pressure to the smaller service providers. Also, it's very difficult to invest on digital tools, on new digital tools. So you are limited on buying off-the-shelf tools, which pretty much is not even set up for smaller installers or smaller service providers. And also, you are exposed if one of your main contractors goes bust, and we've seen many of those examples in the industry, then you have a huge exposure as a company to that event. So consolidation, we see consolidation at the moment on the large scale. So we see big companies buying big companies in order to take their numbers or their megawatt under management in larger numbers and try to identify economies of scale. And this is an opportunity for you because this changes or introduces a new business model in the market. The final two categories is the commercial scale. Here what we have is you might have a portfolio of rooftops or small-scale solar, ground-mount solar, that they are dispersed around the country, different geographical locations. So logistics is an issue. It's a massive issue. You might have teams actually running around, and all you do is spending their time and spending fuel without actually delivering the service. The clients are not actually educated on the problems that the system might present. So there are regulatory issues, there are safety issues, and what we've been selling traditionally as an industry is you install it and you let it be. Yeah? You don't need to clean it, you don't need to service it, everything is fine, don't worry about it, it will produce for 20 years, you don't even need to do anything on it. The reality is completely different. The reality is that we need to start educating our clients on the dangers that a solar system presents if it is neglected. The same issues we face on the residential side. We have pretty much the same issues. And the logistic issues is, again, a huge challenge. So what I see now is companies like cleaning companies or companies that they are already establishing themselves or have established themselves in the residential market, that they start offering inspection services. Or even more, what I see is new systems that can be easily installed on existing, as an add-on component, on existing installations. And this allows us to actually monitor the system and react when we see a problem. I'm afraid that looking at the revenues, you will not be able to have the long-term, if you would like, service agreements that you might find in larger scales. So when we deal with commercial or with the residential fleets, what we need to do is we need to be reactive, not proactive, because there's no money to be proactive. But even on that stage, we have pretty much, I would say, more than 90% of the systems, and that's from experience, I haven't seen the number anywhere, but 9 out of 10 systems that come to us, on one way or the other, they're not even being monitored. And you have big social housing companies that they have thousands of roofs out there. They don't even know if the system works, when they've been serviced, if they're getting the right revenue from the feed-in tariffs. They have absolutely no idea how their system works. So that's a huge opportunity for the industry, for the small installers, for the small service providers. I'm going to give you 5 points of how the O&M is evolving. I'm going to start at the bottom. And the first thing is that the price pressure that we've explained earlier leads to new business models. So one of the new business models that I've seen is that we're moving from an all-inclusive contract, even on large-scale assets, into smaller individual contracts. So we are breaking up the larger contracts into smaller contracts. So we will do. So you have asset owners or asset management firms that they would contract directly with a cleaning company, directly with the ground servicing company, directly with a monitoring company, and you could leave the pure mechanical electrical services to the O&M providers. And that's a new model that is emerging. A second new model that is emerging is that because of these price pressures, you see the larger O&M providers that they're actually breaking down, again, their model. They're fine-tuning or streamlining their operations, so reducing their own overhead by perhaps reducing the in-house personnel, and then they create partnership networks. So if you set yourself up to be a partner or an authorized service provider with a larger installer, then that's, again, an opportunity for a smaller firm. The second point here is that data-driven decision-making becomes a focal point. So everybody's discussing about data. You're going to hear today a lot of people discussing about data. The problem with data is that there is a lot of discussion, but very, very minimal action. So we still use monitoring systems or reporting as a box-ticking exercise instead of actually looking and diving deeper into what the data mean. That will allow us perhaps to do some predictive maintenance or predict future failure trends on specific equipment. That means that we should reconsider our spare parts and so on and so forth. However, the smaller providers, they don't have insight into that because they cannot pay to get that insight. And we had a discussion yesterday about who's going to pay for that data revolution. Partly it's going to be by the bigger service providers, but this will give them a competitive advantage. And partly will have to be paid by the asset owners. But the small provider doesn't have access to that. So you need to piggyback, if you would like, yourselves with a larger installer to get that kind of insight into the data. The third point is about safety and compliance. And we should start treating solar for what it is. It is a decentralized power generating source. You have microplants, thousands and thousands of microplants. It's not mirrors on the roof. And I think I'm preaching to the converted here. But the situation is that it's down to us, again, to educate our clients to start treating solar for what it is. The unsubsidized solar will result in new types of stricter contracts, and I think I have a mistake here on my slide, so excuse me. But the unsubsidized solar will result in, again, further new business models. Unsubsidized solar presents higher risks for the owners. That will mean that the asset management firms will have to provide different type of services, more reactive, more hands-on, with less reaction times, and that will mean that we will need to react in an event much faster. So the benefit for the local service provider is that you're local. You're there within an hour, 2 hours. So again, that's an opportunity that you can put forward to larger installers and start creating these partnerships. And the final part, I think we've already discussed on that. There is a consolidation on higher levels, which will have a knock-on effect. So the opportunity here is that you should niche. So choose an area which is the best area for your company, the area which you would offer perhaps the most value-added services, and start discussing, start communicating to the clientele, to your clientele, about that specific niche. One last slide, and we can go into some questions. So these are my 3 points of what you should do, and I think I've touched on those points throughout the presentation. So first point is niche your service. Become extremely good at something, and then start talking about what kind of problems are you solving by offering this service. To do that, you need to do one single thing. You need to be extremely clear on your target market. You might have more than one target markets, but the message on your target market should be different, addressing the problems of that target market. And usually what we do is we go out and we say how good we are. Look how good electricians we are. Look how quickly we react. But that doesn't actually address the problem of our clients. So as small installers, and being small business, I would argue that the biggest problem perhaps that someone has is how do you approach new clients and how do you sell? Well, you sell by addressing the problems and by giving a clear process to your clients of how you're going to take them from the problem to a gain. The second is create partnerships. So when you discuss this kind of benefits, you need to start creating partnerships, whether you're going to create partnerships with companies on the same level as you, and you will create a network around the country that will allow you to react fast, or you start going through some sort of a certification process with larger service providers to become their authorized partners. I think that partnerships is key for smaller firms to move forward. And the last point is build rapport, not report, with your clients. So essentially what we have here is you have a great benefit. You have a direct relationship with some of your clients. So this is a tool which is extremely important. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. People buy from people. So the better relationship we have with your clients, the better it is, the better opportunity you have to land a 2, 3, 5-year contract with them. And you have to do that by, again, creating that kind of rapport and addressing their problems. So this is pretty much the presentation. I don't want to, to overload you on this wonderful day, and it's wonderful outside and sunny, good for solar. But I would be happy to take any questions from the floor.
I'm quite interested in your comments about the commercial and residential opportunities there. And naturally, preventative measures tend to be against natural human instincts. People will invest in things that they immediately benefit from, but the prospect of going to, especially a residential client, and say, look, you have a burden now of a cost for an O&M agreement, maintenance, support. What has been your experience in motivating commercial and residential customers to consider engaging in an O&M contract?
3 things. Loss of money, if your system is not working. Safety. Your system might burn. If you have neglected your system, you might even lose your insurance because you haven't done properly what you should have been doing as an owner of a PV system. Number 3, compliance. So these are the three, if you would like, main categories where you should be communicating to your client why they should be taking a contract with you now, and what kind of measures are you going to take to help them on all these 3 issues. So you've already made an investment. You're losing money if your system is not working. Do you know that the system is working? When was the last time you've cleaned it? When was the last time that you've run a simple DC test? 3, what happens if the system catches fire? Can you afford to lose your business, to lose your house? Number 3, compliance. Are you compliant with the regulations that are out there? So you say these 3 words, I bet you're going to have a discussion.
You mentioned local authorities and housing associations, and the majority of those have tens of thousands in their housing stock. If they don't have solar already, the majority of that housing stock will have solar at some stage, and they're unmonitored. Now, partly similar answer to the question before would be how do we encourage them to monitor? But in essence, they're not monitoring those systems just now. And so, how would you encourage them? And what's the problem here for local authorities not monitoring those systems?
I think one of the problems that you will have there is not persuading the employer or perhaps the officer that is responsible for such a portfolio. Is how do you take them through a process, through a decision making which could last perhaps 3, 4, 5 months, even longer, and then also from a smaller installer, you put your time in there, you're pitching something to someone, and then that solution has to go to a public tender. So that's the problem with perhaps one major problem that I see on local authorities. However, local authorities are now pressurized to meet CO2 reduction targets. So again, they will have to be somehow measured. KPIs will be put in place to measure how much that CO2 reduction was over the previous 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. The only way to do that is by start capturing data. So are all of these systems, I mean, if you go and have a look at the startup areas or at the startup zone here, you're going to see tremendous innovation on data capture. So there are solutions out there that can actually be add-on solutions to existing systems, or perhaps, replacements or whatever that will help you provide or give clarity to these authorities, to these organizations on how their fleet of system is operating. So the solutions is out there and they are now, they exist. It's about you creating some sort of a productized service, taking it to a client, taking it to a local authority, and then giving them again a process of how you're going to take them from point A to point B and what are the problems that you're solving. So in that situation, I would add decarbonization.
My question is more, on the commercial and residential part. What is your advice? Are you providing O&M as a services, or you combine both installer and O&M? Because for me, it's not the same business model when you are installer and when you are O&M provider. So.
Absolutely, you're correct. But I would argue on that when you have a small installer, again, being very diligent and being responsible in front of your client, one of your responsibilities is that for a period of time, 1 or 2 years, you should be responsible of the wellness of that system. So you don't install and forget and leave, and then, you have to be responsible of how the system operates. And I think if you go through the best practices in the industry and you see at how the MCS is treating everything, that's part of the if you would like, the responsibility we have as installers to go and provide these services at least for a period of time. After that, I would agree that then, yes, it's down to the asset owner, it's down to the house owner, to the business owner to identify perhaps a different service provider. So it's the same argument as we have on larger scale with EPCs. So you've got the EPCs that they have 2 years until fact, 2.5, 3 years, and then they disappear.
So it's a kind of...
but on smaller firms, I think it's okay if you have distinctive productized services to offer different services in the same client, as long as you can distinguish where one service starts and where it finishes.
Thank you.